Thank
Okay,
you.
so we are going to dive right in to the next set of panel presenters. So panel two, that's going to be kicked off by, here we go, Anastasia Sanford. And hold on, I'm going to add her whole title,
Thank you.
Anastasia Sanford Fredericks. Yeah, I got you. I got you. And let me do your introduction real quick. I love it when people have favorite quotes. Her favorite quote is, don't let others define you. Don't let the past confine you. Take charge of your life with confidence and determination, and there are no limits on what you can do or be. Michael Josephson. Anastasia Nicola Sanford Fredericks is an attorney at law. She's married and has three biological children and one adopted. And that is important because guess what? Not everybody has that heart. Not everybody has that capacity. And so that is important to mention because that speaks volumes about who she is as a person. With regard to her experience in work, she has, of course, a law degree, but she is head of her own law firm, Sanford and Associates. It encompasses a real estate firm, a counseling office, and a law office. All of these, her company, her law firm is in Guyana, and she is Guyanese. And this is important again because for her being a woman in this time, in this space, doing what she does and having that local context, it is so helpful to the work going forward. She has a degree from the University of Guyana and Hugh Wooding Law School. She also has a degree from the Institute of Distance and Continuing Education. Now let's get to some of her awards and accolades. Remember, we were talking earlier about how we are multidimensional as people. Would you believe that she likes to sing? Yes, yes. I'm gonna pull your file. I'm gonna pull your file. She she likes to sing and actually is a recording artist, but she'll talk to you about that another time. She has mastered the art of meditation and negotiation. She also is certified in alternative dispute resolution. And in her other life and career, she was a nominee in 2022 for the Advocate Activist of the Year in Gender-Based Violence and or Mental Health, and she won. She won. She was also an honoree in 2022 for the same concept and in that same area. She's also an honoree of 25 Most Influential Women Leaders Award. This was just, oh my goodness, just a few days ago on June 10th, 2023. So she keeps on giving. Her hobbies include dancing, acting. Are you hearing me, Dr. Williams? Acting. She is, guess what? An avid domino player. Who would have thunk? She also is very much invested in volunteering. Through her organization, Synergistic, she joined forces with Melissa Atwell's organization, You Are Not Alone, and together they pulled off the Girlfriend Expo. There, they successfully advocated to women across the length and breadth of Guyana on different issues affecting them, which includes issues on domestic violence. She also has volunteered at a seminar hosted by the Women's Progressive Organization and More Group in observation of gender-based violence, and again, mitigation and eradication being the main focus. She's a coordinator, and this again speaks to her multiple talents. She is the liaison officer for Miss World Guyana. I could go on, but it'll take me another week to complete her resume. Let me go ahead and introduce attorney at law, Anastasia. Hold on. You know I'm going to do the full name, right? Anastasia Nicola Sanford Fredericks. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much for that introduction. Thank you so much for that introduction. It is wonderful being on the same panel with so many of you. I was elated when asked by Miss Marjorie to be a part of this panel. And so I brought a few other people along with me. I always like working with Dr. Tull, who's a clinical psychotherapist. Yes, I think I got it right. So I brought him along on this program, hopefully that he will be along this journey with us as we explore ways in which we can help Mahdia or not forget Mahdia. First, I would just like to stand with the parents who are in mourning of those 20 children that tragically lost their life. As 2 days before that, I tragically lost my eldest son to a motor vehicle accident. And so while I was grieving, then this is a good forum for me because I'm still trying to figure out how to grieve myself. And so I'm trying to find all other channels and ways in which I'm trying to grieve because I don't know how to do it. I've never lost anyone so close and near and dear to me. And so after realizing that there were 20 other mothers/parents who were also grieving for the loss of their child, I stand with them in grieving. Notwithstanding the fact that this program focuses on a holistic approach, an alternative method to sentencing and to juvenile sentencing, that is, I have done some research in respect to the sentencing structure of the juvenile that was charged for these 20 lives. And so first, let me just, for those who don't know, I just wanted to give you a little background, some facts about the Amerindians. They were our first people. I'm Guyanese from Guyana, but I'm talking to you presently from Canada. The Amerindians were our first people. We are a land of 6 races. As many of you will know, we are multicultural, and so all of our lives matter. The Amerindians, they are the first indigenous people, because my 5-year-old will correct me with that, the first indigenous people of Guyana. They were first called the Amerindian Indians, and the American Indians, sorry, when they first landed in Guyana. And ever since they came to Guyana, were first people, they have been fighting for recognition, and they have been fighting for their rights, to be heard, to be noticed, to be a part of, that is in every aspect of our this poor in Guyana, whether it's politics, ministries, wherever it is, they have been fighting for it. They seem to be the lost people, even though that they are our first people. So that is why today, when we speak of Mahdia Matters, or the children of Mahdia Matters, it is important for me. It was important for me to come on this panel to give my voice, my opinions, let me just say, my opinions on what happens in the hinterland or the interregions of my dear country, which I love so much. And that's why this forum is important. So having said that, some research from the United Conventions on the Rights of the Child and other international human rights treaties have been incorporated into the Constitution of Guyana. This should mean that all inhumane sentencing of persons under the age of 18, including capital punishment, corporal punishment, and life imprisonment without the possibility of release, is unlawful. However, much national legislation is at odds with the Constitution. While capital punishment has been prohibited in law, judicial corporal punishment is still on the statute books, and it appears that life imprisonment for under 18s is still lawful. Now, when we say this, should we consider what was done or what is alleged to be done by a 15-year-old? Should she suffer the full and brutal extent of the law for the 20 lives that were lost due to, or allegedly, what she would have done? We bear to answer that question. And is there an alternative to imprisonment for her, what caused it? Did she have the intent? Did she possess the moral compass? Did she knew what she was doing? It is alleged again that this happened because a cell phone was taken away from her, and so she retaliated. In my view, just like any 15-year-old, if you have children or you've been around children, you know that they throw all types of temper tantrums when you take their devices away from them. This was her way of allegedly her temper tantrum, which caused the life of 20 persons. Now, the fight is, should she be punished severely for this? Now, the main laws governing juvenile justice are the Juvenile Offenders Act, 1931, the Criminal Law Offences Act, the Summary Jurisdiction Offences Act. The Juvenile Offenders Act defines a child as under 14, a juvenile as under 17, and a young person as aged 14 to 16. By virtue of the definition of this act, she will now be deemed a juvenile, as it is noted that she's 15 years old. The act sets a minimum age of criminal responsibility at 10. Persons aged 17 are tried as adults. It therefore means that the child aged 15 charged with 19 counts of murder arising from the fire, which tragically resulted in the deaths of 18 students between the ages of 12 to 17 and a 5-year-old boy at the dormitory at Mahdia Secondary School in Guyana, is protected under the Juvenile Offenders Act. Juvenile means a person who is, or in the absence of evidence to the contrary, appears to be 14 years old or older, but less than 18 years old. And if the context requires, including any person who is charged under this act with having committed an offense, while the person was a juvenile or who's found guilty of an offense under this act. I specifically looked at section 14 of the act, which specifies where a juvenile is found guilty of an offense under any law, the court shall not proceed to a conviction, but may deal with the offender in accordance with the act. Section 14, Section 15 states, notwithstanding anything in this act to the contrary, where a child or young person is found guilty or enters a plea of guilty to a charge of an attempt murder or manslaughter, or of wounding with intent to cause grievous bodily harm, the court may sentence the offender to be detained for such period as may be specified in the sentence. Where such sentence is passed, the child or young person shall, during that period, notwithstanding anything in the other provisions of the act, be liable to be detained in such place and on such conditions as the minister may direct, and whilst detained, such detained shall be deemed legal custody. Now, as we all would have heard from the previous presenters, that this child is 15. This child is simply what we're calling her to be, a child. Did she possess the moral intent? Did she want to kill? Does she have the intent to kill 20 persons? What should be her punishment, therefore, due to her actions? These are some of the questions that are unanswered. As the parents of the 20 deceased persons or children, what would be their reaction? Should she have an alternative sentence? Is this child subject to be assessed psychologically? What were the conditions in the interior? Now, I don't know how many of you have visited Guyana before and know that in the interior, or where these young Amerindian girls live, there isn't much to be done, or there isn't much to do. They don't have a lot of the amenities that we have in the capital city. So there isn't really anything much to do. It was also alleged after this fire on Facebook that there were numerous complaints by these Amerindian girls alleging sexual interference by adult males. There's a lot of allegations spewing around, one which surrounds our minister, one of our minister, but I'm not going to get into that. That is on Facebook. It is public knowledge. He has been released on $1 million bail. I'll leave that at that. There are a whole host of information and they are on my partner's page, Miss Melissa Atwell, and they use her. She's an advocate, and there have been several inboxes, most of which she sent to me, like, this is what is happening in the community in Region 7, Region 8, in these outer skirts. I was appalled to know that these Amerindian girls are being taken advantage of. Is this 15-year-old girl a subject of one of such allegation? It is alleged again that she was dealing with an older man. And so it was the communication between she and the older man that she wanted, and she was distraught because this phone was taken away. And this spurred her reaction to doing what she did. I do not know the facts, and I do not wish to comment on the facts, but in looking at her mindset and the fact that we have this program and this forum for us to discuss alternative sentencing in the criminal justice system, and while dealing with juveniles, we should seriously consider whether or not she should face the harshness of the law. Now, I go to the evaluation and reform, and I turn to the USAID in their evaluation of juvenile justice sector reform implementation in Guyana in August 2021. In their findings, reports, there has been progress towards reducing the number of juveniles held in detention, with 40% fewer juveniles held in detention in 2021 compared to 2019. However, those that are in detention continue to face a lack of access to high quality education, counseling, and extracurricular activities. Now, counseling in Guyana, in my view, is something that is seriously lacking. Seriously lacking. I mean, I myself, during my grieving process, there was really no one that you could actually turn to. And in my view, if you have a very weak mindset or a very weak spiritual, you're not in touch with your spirituality, you can be subjected to a whole lot of other demonic things that comes into your mind: suicide, depression, evil thoughts, and you are susceptible to these things once you are weak or you're not in touch with your spirituality. Progress ensures smooth coordination across agencies remains mixed. On the one hand, the Child Care and Protection Agency has made, I'm not even getting into the Child Care and Protection Agency, while are critical to contextualizing the root causes leading to juveniles offense and laying the foundation for more lenient alternative sentences options. On the other hand, the police, who serve as a primary entry point into the justice system, remain unfamiliar with the protocols and procedures for handling juvenile cases. Now, we have big issues with the police, not that they're not doing their job, but it is in my view that I believe that there should be a continuous and ongoing reform project and systems with the police officers, because when it comes to things like domestic violence, dealing with childcare issues, in my view, I don't think the police are really equipped to do so. Now, I know I'm pressed for time and there was a lot more that I have, but I'll put it up on the presentation. But there were a few recommendations that I can just quickly go through to ensure adherence across the board to appropriate procedures for juvenile cases, to facilitate the vetting, approval, and accreditation of formal diversion alternative sentencing, to ensure probation officers are properly trained to realize their potential when it comes to counseling juvenile probationers, and to facilitate successful reentry and reintegration. The Sophia Detention Center should strengthen and expand its educational and vocational educational programs. It is my view, again, this ends my presentation. I kind of had to rush it, but it is my view again that with proper implementation and sustainability, I do believe that a reintegration system is possible for reform in Guyana once adequate structure is put in place. I thank you so much.
And we thank you so much for that. That was on point. And anything that you weren't able to share in your presentation, please add that to the conversation when we get to that open discussion. Throw that in there. Let it add value, because I know you're bringing some strong nuggets, some important nuggets. The thing is, you're looking through at this through that legal lens, and that is so important. You also have the legal context within your country and within that jurisdiction, and that is so, again, important to any reform. And notice I'm doing the whole holistic thing, the whole bubble, to any reform and reimagination work that's going to go, that no, not that's going to go on, that will go on, that will be going on. So thank you for that. Amazing. So really quickly, we're going to go ahead and move to our next presenter, which is Chief Probation Officer Marlon Yarber. And I will really quickly read his bio. You guys, this team that's sitting on this forum today, it's heavy hitting. We're going to knock this out of the ballpark, and we're going to take some names. We're going to be taking some names. It's time. This is the time and the season. Marlon Yarber was appointed Sacramento County Chief Probation Officer in October 2021. He began his career with Sacramento County Probation as Assistant Chief Probation Officer in December 2013. He provided oversight of adult operations between 2013 and 2018, and then transitioned to juvenile operations. Before joining Sacramento County, Yarber served as Deputy Probation Officer for the Stanislaus County Probation Department, working with gangs and high-risk adult offenders. He transitioned to the state and worked for the state of California's Office of Criminal Justice Planning, overseeing the landmark Juvenile Accountability Block Grant. He was later appointed Deputy Director for the Corrections Standards Authority, overseeing a variety of federal and state initiatives in California, including juvenile justice realignment. In 2011, Yarber returned to community corrections as the Assistant Chief and Interim Chief Probation Officer for the Yolo County Probation Department. In the same year, he was awarded the Kirkpatrick Professional Development Award in recognition of his work to reduce disparities in the criminal justice system. He moved to Sacramento County Probation in 2013. Yarber was a 2016 Annie E. Casey Foundation nominee and holds certification in leadership and facilitation and a bachelor's degree in psychology from the University of California, Davis. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Chief Probation Officer Marlon Yarber.
Yes, thank you for that introduction. I'll try to keep my comments timely. I've got a PowerPoint that I'll turn to. Appreciate the introduction again, Marjorie. Hope to share just a little bit of information with regard to the work I've been involved in, sort of where my department is at now, and hope that folks can take from it, perhaps ideas or practices that they may implement in your own jurisdictions. As Marjorie said, I've been the chief now, just about 2 years. I was named interim chief just before the official appointment. And the piece I'll say first, just the reasons for doing this type of work to me are very personal. As a young man, teenager, early 20-something, I was one of those kids, not unlike today, who had a lot to say about criminal justice, and always wondering and questioning, why so many of us are in the system. Why is it that we are always, subject to arrest? And in my family, you have to understand the context. There are as many of us who work in the system, that wear the badge, and maybe are sworn to uphold the peace, as there are members members of my family who are behind bars and who are subject to supervision and who, have touched the system and may still be under the supervision of the system. And so, lots of both, as I say. And as a young man, again, having a lot to say about the system, those members of my family who wore the badge were very challenging of me. You seem halfway intelligent. You should, instead of just being critical of the system, think about how you might be able to affect change by working within the system. And that's been largely a motivator for me in terms of the work that I've done and the types of reforms I've tried to help implement both statewide and also now here in Sacramento County. I'm also, I'd be remiss were I not to tell the story very quickly of, the other real reason for pursuing the position of chief. There's nothing like affecting change, implementing policy in the jurisdiction where you live, where you raise your family. It matters just that much more when you have that degree of investment in what happens in your community. And I could have retired a couple of years ago and remember just very vividly, walking through our juvenile facility and seeing all the black and brown faces and realizing like, oh, perhaps not. The timing is right, really, for me to use my position, my experiences, my interests and motivations to try to affect change, to support both the effective reentry of that population, but also help slow the matriculation into justice, if you will. And so hopefully that helps share just a little more of who I am. So let me see if I can share my screen and get the PowerPoint going here. You all see this?
No.
Oh, hang on. Sorry. 1 second. Let me move here. See if this is any better. Any better?
No.
Not projecting at all.
No.
Still nothing. All right. Well, I will skip the PowerPoint and apologies. I can use my notes and actually have plenty of material. So I'll just share first. The mission of my department. It's one that is really focused on supporting people where they are. We have a tagline in our mission that references supporting positive change. And that change is not just about, change with our clientele, but it's also, change within the system. And so within California, probation's often looked to implement, really wide-ranging reform efforts. Simply because we have this mentality of getting things done. And so we see ourselves as not just, again, supporting change with our clients, but also supporting change amongst the other stakeholders. And that oftentimes leads to us being put in positions where, we're the ones advocating the most in some cases as it relates to, how a youth particularly might experience the system. Our role, I never want to assume, but the role of probation officers, it's first and foremost to provide some level of public safety. We do that by connecting, the justice involved population to, all types of services and supports, if you will. And the hope is that you can prevent then, future victimization. And so really the assessments, the treatment, the supervision that the officers provide and the services we do in concert with other agencies is really all geared towards that public safety strategy. my department, and I should actually start by saying, the community I serve is about 1.5 million people, so of some size. And with that, there are resources provided to us that help in our efforts. We've got about 700 staff in the probation department. It's split really across, the adult services, if you will, and as well as the juvenile services of our department. Largely kind of focused on our interface with the courts. Probation is really the entity in California that's tasked with making recommendations around how cases will resolve. But a lot of folks also forget that, at least in California, and I think this may be the case across other locales, that we are also tasked with operating juvenile detention. And so we have here in Sacramento a facility that has upwards of 400 beds to support the incarceration of youth. Now, I share that number because it's a little startling, when you think, at least at first, like, oh wow, do you have 400 kids in custody? And no, we don't have anywhere near that number, and largely it's due to some of the reforms that we've implemented. So currently today, I want to say there are about 175 youth in custody, maybe 176. And that number really is up because of some new responsibilities we've had. So over the last maybe 3 or 4 years, we've averaged roughly 130 youth in custody. But going back in time, we have experienced overcrowding. We've experienced conditions that were not great. And so I will say, to many of you who are, maybe struggling with systems change, sometimes it takes a change in law to push forward with regards to reforms. Sometimes it takes the lawsuit, like being sued, sometimes can help move forward change that's necessary. Or it can take, a change in leadership. And, here in Sacramento, we've experienced all three of those things. We've been sued, we've had sweeping changes with the law, and at least as it relates to leadership, as I came in as assistant chief, there was a brand new chief 10 years ago, and he and I were the only outsiders who came in with, as I say, the crazy ideas around reform efforts, and a lot of that has led to sweeping changes here in Sacramento that we've had some nice recognition for. And so, going back in time, sort of keeping our minds focused around the juvenile population, we had close to 4,000 youth in Sacramento under the jurisdiction of the juvenile court. And today there's roughly 1,200 youth, only about 600 or so on formal probation with the probation department, on formal probation here in the county. And a lot of that is due to the services that we've helped implement and reforms we've helped bring our partners along with here in the county. And that looks primarily like in-home supportive services. And so really shifting the way in which we engage the community from, one of really, being less sort of proactive law enforcement, really to being more supportive and understanding the trauma that many of our youth and families have experienced, sometimes even at the hands of law enforcement. And so by becoming more trauma informed, it's helped us really embrace the ideology of, instead of, what did you do, as opposed to, what happened to you that maybe led to your encounter with the system. And so within our facility, we've got a couple trauma-informed units where we work with clinical teams that help implement a curriculum that gets at the experiences of kids in the community, their family issues. We've implemented in the community, really high level, well-researched treatment modalities to support family engagement and participation in therapies that, proven to show results. And coupled with that, and sort of getting at the issues of equity and disparities, it's really also about, hiring the right people, not just within my department. Our workforce statistics look very good in terms of what our community looks like. But hiring people with lived experience, people who've touched the system themselves, people who understand, and have walked in the shoes of someone who maybe is currently justice involved. And that is not just limited to probation, but also to the service providers who help in that treatment delivery. And so using peer supports, folks with lived experience to help with engagement has really helped us kind of shift our focus locally. And so with that in mind, it's led to, lots of vacant space in that building I talked about, that juvenile facility. And we've repurposed many of the empty portions of it. And so our juvenile hall, if you will, the place that the facility that we operate, has a fully functioning library. It has a swimming pool. It's got career technical education components. So we teach culinary programs, construction programs. And so, it's for folks who've worked in our industry, when you think about, power tools in a correctional setting, it's really kind of, a game changer because, just a few years ago, that would have been the last thing you might think about introducing in that particular environment. But, by changing the way we engage with kids, changing the way we even recruit and hire our own staff and train them, it's allowed for some of those things to be implemented, which has really helped drive that number down. In addition to those services, we've got college programming, so connecting kids to college opportunities where, many of our youth, when you ask them, never have thought about college. No one in their family has ever attended college, and they'll say, maybe for the first time now, they're actually thinking about furthering their education. We've got a couple multi-sensory de-escalation rooms, really a tool taken from the occupational therapy realm, if you will, implemented in our facility that helps sort of de-escalate when you start to blow out, as they say, or decompensate, using more of a technical term. They're allowed to actually engage staff, identify who their supports are, can actually talk about maybe the things that have occurred on the outside, and maybe talk about the anxieties around what the next court date might entail, so that they can help sort of bring their own fears down, if you will. For some of that work and other things we've helped implement, it's led to our facility being recognized, I think 3 times now nationwide, as the best facility, if you will, as identified by performance-based standards. So we're pretty proud of that work. And for it, that with those tools, I should say, it's helped with our engagement with community, which is really sort of, the things I wanted to talk further about is just sort of where we're at today. And, I had a slide, I think, titled Future or Next Steps, and it's really, things that we're currently working on. So in terms of that engagement, it really means that we have to be much more transparent, obviously. Thinking about the Black community, lots of suspicion around what law enforcement does, lots of curiosity, thinking about my own motivations for working in the system. And so it's important to share data. It's important to invite people in. It's important to, hold open meetings and allow for community engagement, allow the community to actually be a part of the decision making and have input as to how systems perform. And so, again, using sort of and thinking about using my position and thinking about my own motivations, it's really helped engage and allay some of the fears. Not all of them, obviously, but some of the fears, of course. It's meant more participation in community initiatives. So for myself, the place where I met Marjorie Vieser herself was through the My Brother's Keeper Alliance, supported by the Obama Foundation here in Sacramento. And so things like that, thinking about non-traditional partnerships, things, again, years ago we may not have involved ourselves in, but now we actually see ourselves as part of, a cohort, a milieu, if you will, of folks who are working in the same direction. The other piece I would underscore, just as it relates to community engagement, is really just remembering that you have to listen. It's not always that, we know what's best, but just making sure you listen and hear what the community is talking about, I think is incredibly important. I'll end with just a couple things in terms of future steps for us. We're working more to reduce barriers. So our county is of great size, really. So we're thinking more about and actually already, providing extended office hours into the evening to address, folks who have full-time jobs when they have to report to probation. It sometimes creates a problem. We've just been awarded a grant to develop mobile service centers, so we're able to get further out and reach out and touch more people. We've worked hard to co-locate services, so we have nurses eligibility specialists, mental health clinicians on site in our buildings so that we aren't sending people elsewhere to get those same services. We were just awarded, also one of just a handful of jurisdictions awarded here in California to end the incarceration of girls. I understand that there's an issue with young ladies, and a particular young lady, if I understand the story correctly. And so we ourselves, even with our downsizing of the population, as I mentioned, still are left with the same number of girls in the system that there were 20 years ago. And so we're going to be working together with all of the stakeholders to look upstream as to what types of flags, issues, concerns, barriers, challenges, if you will, that we all know and have seen maybe when the young lady was 7 or 8 years old, that have led to them now being incarcerated at the age of 15, 16, 17. And so excited about some of that work. So I'll stop there and remain on to engage in some of the question and answer.
That was amazing, and I'm so sorry you weren't able to share your PowerPoint.
No worries. It's not that great anyway, but
That's what you say, but we want to see what you have on your PowerPoint.
Sure.
I'm just saying, we want to see, but also it'll be made available to anybody who would like to have it. So even if we weren't able to see it, and technology being what it is, we're never able to completely control it. We will make that available to you as a resource. So you've not lost anything of value. You just blew my mind when you said that the number of girls that are currently incarcerated in California, the number is still the same as 20 years ago. 2 decades. How many generation? How many years is a generation? That's a whole generation. We are losing. I mean, that is incredible, but at least these are steps forward. So that's the beauty of it. Well, guess what, you guys? It is time to open the floor. Oh, not quite yet. I'm getting ahead of myself because you excited me just now. I'm going to go ahead and invite Dr. C.G. Warwin to present. But before I do that, I'm going to do his introduction. But that was incredible. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. There's a lot of hope, and there's a lot that we can pull from. Why reinvent the wheel? We merely need to adapt the wheel to our local context and the local need. So more to come. Thank you for holding fast while we finish this segment, go into the group discussion, and then we will take it from there. Thanks again. All right. So let me pull up my cheat sheet. Dr. C.G. Walwin, he is the co-owner of Integrity Assessments, LLC. Dr. C.G. Walwin began his police career as a Texas peace officer and retired as a Florida peace officer. Dr. Walwin was a sworn member of the Harris County Sheriff Department accreditation team and an adjunct professor at the University of Texas. Dr. Walwin further served as commissioner of the Royal St. Christopher and Nevis Police Force, first in the Caribbean, that's St. Kitts and Nevis, where his leadership led to a 50% reduction in homicides. Dr. Walwin also served as the chairman of CARICOM. For our U.S. friends and visitors, CARICOM, that is the Caribbean community. It's somewhat similar to the United Nations. It's a body that represents I think it's 13 member nations. And it is, again, as I said, similar to the U.S. as a United Nations. So Dr. Walwin also served as a chairman of CARICOM, Military Commanders and Police Commissioners Committee. He supported community-oriented policing and constitutional policing. Dr. Walwin was presently serving as a Deputy Commissioner of Territorial Police Operations for the Police Department of the Virgin Islands of the United States, from which he recently retired. Dr. Walwin and his wife, Antoinette Walwin, own Integrated Assessment LLC. It's a lie detector company and a private investigations company. It's based in Houston, Texas. The company specializes in court-appointed capital murder and other complex investigation for indigent inmates. The Walwins are both licensed as Texas private investigators. Dr. Walwin holds a PhD in public safety with a specialization in leadership, a Master's of Science in Security Management, Emergency Management, and a Bachelor of Science in Criminal Justice. He has been married for over 30 years and has 4 daughters. Excuse me. I would also like to add to that, he did provide additional information. He served as the interim chief of police in Texas, deputy sheriff, again in Texas, deputy sheriff and detective in Florida. He also served as and continues to serve as an adjunct international criminal justice professor at the University of Houston in Clear Lake, Texas. He has certifications from the Texas Commission on Law Enforcement as a police instructor and police officer. He has an active license as a private investigator and also an active license as an eye detection examiner. That's ocular motion deception detector. I need to note also that he has several publications, Ethics in Law Enforcement, the Silent FTO Manual, a Texas Peace Officer's Guide to Patrol, as well as understanding what factors influence Florida state troopers to enforce the driving under the influence statute, a phenomenological study. He also holds a number of affiliations, but that will take me another year to read. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dr. C.G. Walwin.
Good afternoon, everybody. And thank you, moderator. I'm glad you stopped.
Yes, me too.
Okay, my name is C.G. Walwin. And I am Caribbean by birth. I was raised in the U.S. Virgin Islands and been here in Houston for the last 40 years. I live in Florida and I live in Houston. And today I just happen to be on a court-appointed case. So I'm out here in the sun. It's almost 100 degrees. So I'm sitting in a parking lot because I didn't want to miss this. My take on the whole thing of juvenile reform and criminal justice reform, it took a turn for me when I went to St. Kitts because I was raised as an American police officer. And then when I got to St. Kitts, it was a different atmosphere. But what touched me in St. Kitts was one day I was standing on top of the 3rd floor of the police station, and I was speaking to a young man. His mother had brought him to me because he was going down the wrong path, and she brought him to me so I could try to see if I could steer him away. And while I was on top of the roof, some schoolboys were passing by down on the ground there, and one of them hollered, "Commissioner Walwin, we want you to talk to us. We don't want to go to jail. My brother is over there in the prison." And the prison is next to the police station. So I sent my driver down to go down on the 1st floor and bring those it was about 4 or 5 little boys, well, teenagers, and bring them to the roof. And that's how the whole thing for me started. There was a doctor by the name of Dr. Martin and another one, Dr. Esdale. Dr. Martin came to my office one morning in the commissioner's office, and he showed me a report done by Dr. Esdale. And it says that children as young as 10 years old in St. Kitts were starting to drink and smoke marijuana. And then he showed me the face of the gang in St. Kitts and Nevis. And the face of the gang in St. Kitts and Nevis was 13 to 16-year-old men, young boys. And so I found a way. I had a meeting with the 3 gang leaders in St. Kitts. I invited them to the police station, and we sat down in my office. I bought them lunch, and over lunch, I asked them, what is it, or how best can we as a police agency serve your community? What can we do to help reduce the homicides? The homicides were 36 on average per year. And these were young men under 24 dying from age 15 to 24, getting murdered. how best can the police intervene to help this? And the young man told me a few things that on the surface they seem trivial, but one man's garbage is another man's feast. And what the young man told me was, we don't like robbing people, but we have to eat. And because we have to eat, we have to go where the money is. We commit burglaries and we commit robberies. He said, we don't like doing this. So if you can get us a piece of land, we will plant food. And you can send your officers 24 hours a day to check the land to make sure we are not planting marijuana. And they also told me something else that was very shocking. They said, we don't want our children to grow up in the gangs. A lot of us are now becoming fathers, and we don't want what we went through for our children. So you have to find a way to reach these children before they get to high school. In St. Kitts, they go to high school at age 12. He said, once they get to high school, you have lost a generation because they have to choose which gang they're going to affiliate with while they're in school. So you have to find something to get them before they get there. And right before they left, one of them told my wife, he says, Miss Walwyn, you have a great husband. We want you to know that if anything happens to your husband, he was not murdered by the gangs. It was by his own police officers. This is again telling my wife that if I get murdered while I'm on that island, it is not by the gangs, it's by the police. Because the gangs have seen the things that I was doing, and I opened up my office to them so they can come and speak whenever they want. And this was never done. I believe in community policing, and I had to find a way to create an atmosphere of trust. And that is one of the things that I did. So the first thing we did was we addressed the issue of the food. I went to the prime minister. I went to the prime minister and I went to the prime minister and I asked him for a piece of property for these members because they told me, if you give us a piece of land in this particular part of the island, we can walk from our neighborhood to that place. The gangs on the other side of that will not attack us because we have a truce. Anybody can walk in this area. This area is a safe haven. But we went one step further and got them property in their own neighborhood. And as a result, remember, we had 36 murders on average every year. As a result of having this property, we introduced a hydroponics farming system for these guys. And the food that they produced was so much that they began selling organic materials, organic food to the Marriott Hotel. And then one of the larger supermarkets bought the extras. And so these guys were making money and were not robbing people anymore. As a result of this, the homicides in that part of town went to almost zero. The homicides around the entire federation, which is Twin Island Federation, went from 36 in the first year down to 18. We also went into the schools. We brought two programs that we use in the schools. And one program was called MAGIC, mentoring, mentoring, I forgot the middle one. Oh, mentoring, advising, guiding, and instructing children. You have to forgive me. Mentoring, advising, guiding, and instructing children. And this was based on a partnership that we formed with the Orange County Sheriff Office in Orlando, where I retired from. And this was a program we had in our elementary schools, or your primary schools, as most of the British people say. And this was in the 5th grade there. We put them in the primary school because we knew that once they got into the middle school, which was 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, that their mentality was going to change. So we started giving them alternatives to gangs, drugs, guns, and violence. We graduated 270 children from that program in St. Kitts, in that school. And one of the reasons why we did that, besides with the gangs, was the first January that I was there. A few months after I was there, a student left school in January when school started, went home dressed in all black, put on a mask, and came back and used a machete to chop his one of his classmates, a classmate that had beat him during the Christmas season, had beat him while school was out. So when school came back in, he went home, came back, and started chopping this kid. Didn't kill him, but chopped him. We had a second incident in another school, so I implemented a program called the school resource program in St. Kitts, and I started placing an officer in each school to avoid the violence. But as a result of this program, this magic program, in the schools, we saw juvenile crime drop in St. Kitts. We introduced another program in the high schools, and it was called Teens and Police Service. This came out of Houston. As you know, I live and work in Houston for years. And so I formed a relationship with the Houston police, and they gave us a program called TAPS, Teens and Police Service. And this program reached the kids, the at-risk kids who are already, I heard someone speak about children in jail. They were already convicted of their crimes, but they could not go to a regular school, so they have a special school for them to go to. And so we started reaching these children and work with them and brought them out of those schools based on the program and brought them back into the regular schools. As a matter of fact, one child that I spoke to, I was a guest speaker there, and he wrote me months later and says, I listened to what you said and I have my diploma. And that one child made a difference. So here in St. Kitts, we have the TAPS program, we have the MAGIC program, and then I had to leave St. Kitts, but I left a 5-year succession plan. And in the last 5 years after I left, there were almost 0 murders in St. Kitts. If they had 3, they had a lot. The juvenile crime went to 0 in St. Kitts. And they have a new government now, and the program has been dragging because it's a new government. They have not started doing anything with it. As a result, we have seen this year alone, they have 15 homicides, and it's only into the sixth month of the year. So these programs do work. These children are our future. I keep hearing Marjorie saying the generation. If you look back at what happened in St. Kitts between the time I left in 2015, between 2015 and now in St. Kitts, they had almost 0 murders up until this year. And the juvenile crime was non-existent because we put things in place. We listened. I heard someone came on earlier and he said, why aren't other people from the areas that we're speaking about here? I would tell you, it is always important to get the input from the community that you're trying to reach. I've seen this done in many places, and we don't invite the people. I know you said you invited them. I heard you, but we don't invite the people. I was in Trinidad one time. Chris Chinapu, he was a speaker for CARICOM, and in the audience was a bunch of young people, teenagers. And Chris was asking the adults questions, and we couldn't answer. And he turned to the teenagers, and he asked, "Who was this reggae rapper?" Um, we didn't know, but the children knew. And so a lot of times when things are happening in our community, adults will not know, but the children will know. So we have to find a way to reach the children, protect them, but also develop trust with them, especially through our community policing efforts to help reduce the at-risk children within our community. And that's all I have to say.
Wow. Thank you for that. Tools and tips. Tools and tips. This is what we're talking about. This is what this is about. And again, starting at root. When people ask me what I do, I tell them I do root work. In the US, Black people call, magic, what we call obia at home or santeria and those kind of things. They call it roots with an S. And so I'm like, no, it's root work because that's where it begins. Every tree is sustained by its roots. Its beginning is under the ground where that seed was. And then when it germinated, root went down and the rest of it came out. So what we can't see is more times more impactful than what we can. You touched on some important things, and we're going to go into our discussion segment now, talking about the pain points. Who feels it knows it. These are my characterizations, but that's what I heard. Our youth know, and we are not talking to them. What works for you? That kind of stuff. So let me just go ahead and thank you right now for such, again, a powerful, impactful presentation. And let's just go right into our discussion segment. Anybody who would like to ask questions? Up. Leslyn, I see and honor your hand. Go ahead,
Good.
please.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Anastasia Sanford, Rich Fredericks, for inviting me on this. I'm always intrigued, and I'm always ready to be a part of any discussion that involves growth, any discussion that involves a better life for our kids. You know, the last speaker, he just mentioned, he said that children are our future. And that is the exact way I feel. The young people that are coming up, the babies that are coming up, they will be responsible for our world when we're gone. So why not, engage? Why not instill? Why not put into what you already have into them so that their lives can be better than our lives were when we were children? Now, I'm going to start with attorney at law Anastasia. She spoke about our first people. Now we're talking about the Mahdia children. They are a part of their generation from the first people that came to Guyana. I live in the US now, but Guyana is home. There's no question about it. They are descendants of the generation who was there first. But from my knowledge, they're always in the back burner, which is really sad. I'm an artist in direct support. I'm a member of Artists in Direct Support. I have been a member of Artists in Direct Support. And my stint in Artists in Direct Support, we did outreach programs where we go to teach people about HIV and AIDS, testing and counseling. And most of the time, I remember we did the 10 regions of Guyana. And this one time we went to Camarang and to do testing and counseling to the young people, the indigenous people. We went on boats, we went into their area to reach with them. Then one day we were at the hospital out in the town, and I met a 13-year-old girl. She had a baby on her hip and one in her tummy and one that was dead. She brought a dead baby out and she was pregnant and she had another baby with her. She was 13, and it broke me. The conversation I had with this girl, one, she did not know who the father was for any of these children, because the first one, she met this guy one time in September month when they come out to have fun. That's it. Don't know, never saw him again. She had the baby there. The next one, she got raped. This is the one that died, and they had that baby in there. She bring the baby out to get him checked, but he died on the way out. And she was pregnant again and didn't know who the father was. She's 13, and that is one of the things. There's no protection for these girls who live in these areas where they're not really out there to like Anastasia said, live in the town where they will know things. They don't have anything. So anybody who comes into there and say, oh, look, I have this money. I'm dressing nice and whatever. They get excited because they think that's it. That's the roof that they met. So that's how come we have so many of these young girls are pregnant and don't know who the fathers are. They don't know anything about, saying no to sex, saying no to this and saying no to that. Everything is yes, yes, yes. So that was one of the things. They're not being protected. We have all of these indigenous girls living in these villages and stuff, and then they come out and get used and abused by the people who should know better. So we should be doing more for the descendants of our first people. Another thing, another speaker spoke on systemic poverty. Poverty, when it comes to the system, there's no system in place to help people who are living in poverty. And poverty leads to abuse. Poverty leads to sexual assaults. Poverty leads to so many things. Poverty leads to all of these kids wanting to do things that they should not be doing because they feel that they have to go do what they have to do to survive, because there aren't systems in place to help these young people. That's why we have so many crimes being committed by young people. Now,
Leslie,
yes.
if I could jump in really quickly, everything I just heard you to say, right, so far, do you notice that they tie into the SDGs?
Yeah.
Do you notice that? Everything. I had to jump in. I'm like, but wait a minute. Does Leslie know that she's touching on everything? You give me goosebumps. You're talking the SDGs. And for those of you who don't know what the SDGs are, the United Nations has 17 targets. They call them the Sustainable Development Goals. And they are, the premises is that by 2030, they will have hit those benchmarks and go beyond if possible. And everything that Leslie is speaking about here can be found under those 17, if you will, rubrics. This is a power conversation right now. This is a power conversation right now because there's also funding. Because funding tends to be a huge issue with creating change and sustaining change. Yeah. So I just wanted to drop that nugget in there. I apologize for interrupting.
No,
and I
it's
know
fine.
that others want to comment as
yes,
well.
so I really need to get going with that. Yes. Training as well. Training is very important when dealing with children. Marlon Yaber, I think he spoke about training, people who need to be trained. Our last speaker as well, listen to the success story that he just gave us on children in, the juveniles who were dealing, they were dealing with. That was a success story right there. And training has a lot to do with it. All right. Marlon Yaber, he said, say something. That's my note. I said, say something, do something about it. He was saying something, and here he is, a chief, doing something about it. We need people to stand up and start doing something for our young people. I took a lot of notes. My thing is, I was a substitute teacher for the last school year, and the kindergartners, we had a room like he suggested, a de-escalation room. Why don't we have that? Kids express themselves more when they're in an environment, when you give them an environment to talk. Not a lot of kids like to talk in a group. They don't want to say what's going on with them in a group because of embarrassment and that kind of stuff. Why don't we have things like that in place? So I am so ecstatic, so intrigued to be sitting here listening to all of you. I am well pleased. Thank you, Anastasia, for inviting me to this. I am so grateful. Thank you all for your wonderful work that you're doing. Please continue to keep up doing the good work that you're doing. The kids are our future and they need us. Thank you. You're muted.
I am. Thank you, Leslie, for that. I see Anastasia has opened up her mic. Oh, I see Antonio as well with her hand up. People are getting into this. Everybody jumping in the fray. Anastasia, I saw you first. Antonio,
Right,
I honor your hand next.
I just wanted to quickly say, I stand corrected if this is what is happening, but I was watching the news the other day in Canada. There was a stabbing where two students and a teacher was stabbed, and immediately the authority disseminated counselors and into the schools to deal with the families, to deal with the persons who were stabbed. They weren't seriously injured, but the counselors were there. I have not seen that in my own country. I stand corrected if that is what is happening, but we got 20 young persons who are now deceased, and I have not heard anything about counselors being disseminated into the region to deal with the grieving parents. And
Okay.
when I talk about counseling, I mean, I know we have our husbands, our wives, our immediate family, but I'm talking about the persons who are certified and who are professional in the area to deal with this and to help them through a grieving process. Again, this is what Guyana is lacking. I have not heard anything of that in my country. And so I just wanted to note that as one of our solutions going forward, that it should be noted that this is one of the proposals that we should put in there, that we need trained professional people to deal with traumas. And I know sometimes it's an expensive process, and so it's being brushed away, but it's a serious issue because it calls into question a whole host of other things like depression and suicide, and this is sometimes the lead cause of all the other triggers that happens immediately after a trauma. So I just needed that to be noted as one of our solutions: professional
Thank you.
counseling.
Yes, and thank you for raising that and elevating that conversation. We did, in a very rudimentary way, step into that space because we weren't there for that, and we weren't there for a long enough period of time to do anything in a meaningful way. Up to and including, we made recommendations. That's one of the reasons we're coming back. Made recommendations, not just for counseling, for the family and for the survivors, but also for people like the first responders who had to go in and help rescue. That's very traumatizing. That is a heck of an experience. And I was there at the vigil for the children. And let me tell you, the survivors were there, the community was there, the family members were there. It was palpable. One of the other things that myself and my colleagues were talking about, we're like, it's nice to bring up all these school children, the little school choirs, and they're singing. But again, we have to consider the psychological implications for the family. My child is no longer here to dress up in their uniform and go on stage and sing and present. So again, there's so many dimensions to this thing, and you are absolutely correct. Thank you for that. Antonio, I see an honor your hand, and our presenters, panel members, please jump in and offer
Okay.
your, additional input. Go ahead, Antonio.
Okay. Um, I think what I want to say is that I think it takes a whole community to raise the children, and that I think we just need to keep on pushing forward as well, and never give up.
And to let these parents know that it's okay to get help for these kids. Let them pay attention to these kids.
Okay, and is that mom? Mom,
Yeah.
can we see you?
Yes.
Where are you?
Yeah.
So there,
I'm right
there's
here.
mom. Everybody, that's mom.
Hi.
And there we go. Mom's got his back, right? Mom's showing up. I heard you
Yes.
just say, Antonio, what I heard was when you said it takes a whole community, to me, that's the village concept. It takes a village to raise a child. We have moved
Yes.
away from
Yes.
for some reason. You also said to be persistent, to keep pressing, to keep going, even if there's no
Yes.
money, even if there's no political will, even if it's, unpopular initially. And also, I heard mom to say that, is it a support system? Is that what I was hearing from you, mom?
Yes.
Okay, so supportive systems, all of these are value added. Thank you very much, you guys, for your input. Is there anybody else who would like to make any comments, share? Yes.
I'm just going to comment as the educator in the room, and having taught in Guyana for 10 years and being, Guyana is very close to my heart. So when Marjorie jumped and asked me, I said, yes, I'm going to be part of this because this is crucial. But what I'm hearing, and please correct me if I may be wrong, but it is a struggle in the Caribbean, and being back in the Caribbean for a couple of months doing research in trauma-informed narrative therapy and all of that, being trained in that. What I find, and in Guyana, when I was there in those 10 years, and also not only looking back, but being immersed in the present, this kind of work that we are discussing here, which is very, very important, have been treated as an add-on in the education system, has been often, and I use that word very cautiously, often being recognized as something we do as a sprinkling, rather than an integral part of the curriculum and pedagogies within the classroom. It needs to be part of the curriculum. And again, I return to my experiences working with immigrant families in Canada, and refugee families in Canada, indigenous families in Canada. It was only when I picked up my bag and said, I'm going to be part of the community, and I'm going to move there and live in the community and be part of that community and let the community guide. And we can get to race and all of that, but finding that holistic, humanistic approach to education, because what I'm hearing is it starts there. It starts in the family, of course, but families make up the education system. Families make up societies. And when we get to the prison system, there are families. The young people that find themselves behind bars are part of families, as we all know, right? So how do we take this kind of training, trauma-informed storytelling, whatever rich traditions we bring, healing traditions, transformative traditions, how do we take this into Caribbean classrooms and make it an integral part of the curriculum, teacher education training? How do we reach that system? I have a few ideas of which I'm working on, but you need the community. You need that the holistic community approach.
And that's why we're going to be continuing to reach out to and utilize you and your expertise. This community that we've created wasn't by happenstance, nor is it a one-off. So we're going to move forward and work collaboratively going forward. I do see and honor your hand, Dr. Williams. We made some really strong points when you saying live in that community. You're walking a mile in my shoes. You know how that shoe squeezed my con, yeah? So when you're on the outside looking in, that's different than having to get up at 5 a.m. in the morning. There is no electricity. I have to walk 3 miles to get to the river to go bail water and bring it, get water in my pan, bring it back. I have to strike a fire. Honestly, when my grandmother taught me how to make coal, because I can't make my own coal. I don't have to go buy coal. I can make my coal. I can live in the bush. And I can live in the palace. But again, until you have that lived experience, it's really hard to relate. Yeah. And so thank you for that intervention, Dr. Williams. And Dr. Williams, before I honor your hand again, I apologize. Ambassador Daisley is going to have to leave for 12:30. And I would like to ask permission to move him, as soon as you've made your comment, to move his presentation up so he can give us the value of his thoughts and comments, and then we can go on with the rest of the program. So I just want to share that. The floor is yours.
Good. Just connecting to what the panel spoke about and the change and the support system for the youth. I wanted to just put this part here in the sense that I want you to consider going forward the adults who do not want to see the youth become something. It may sound crazy, but I want you to assess that carefully as you go forward. There are adults who do not want the youth to take their position. What do we do with these people who are blockers of progress of the youth, and the youth see it and transform these energies into danger? We call it danger. So let us think about that, because there are some adults who have not reached self-actualization, and so they block every attempt by youths who may just seem to surpass them. So open our eyes, open our minds. I have done a few things, like, and I'll say it quickly. I was told not to help certain persons who were deemed mad, thrown into mental institutions. And when I used my program, they came out, and these persons are now managing institutions and organizations. But they told me they are mad. Here's the point. You didn't want this person to rise. So we have the opportunity, we have the ability, but who are the blockers, are the gatekeepers of these persons who want to release? Let us assess that as well as we go forward, yeah?
Thank you. Because again, we look outside for the problem. We also need to look inside, yeah? I know, like here in California, one of the pieces of data that I came about, the trends, is that most of the women, females that I know of, that I interviewed, that I've done the research with, who have a drug addiction issue, they were introduced to drugs by their mothers.
Marjorie, you're frozen.
I'm sorry, am I frozen? Am I back?
Now you're back.
I'm back. Somebody was trying to call in. Sorry about that. But again, you make a good point. So let me stick a pin in it here. Let me invite Dr. Daisley to present, and let me get his bio really quickly, do his intro, and then the floor is yours. His Eminence, Ambassador Professor Adrian Daisley, is an accomplished professional with extensive expertise in communications, business, and people development, and speaks fluent Portuguese. Dr. Daisley is the International Relations Director and an Associate Professor of the Faculty at Global Education and Professional Excellence Academy. He is the International Registrar of the Good Samaritan Theological Seminary Incorporated organization. As an independent consultant, Dr. Daisley focuses on supporting sustainable innovation, human rights, peace, and climate education to address current global concerns and problems. He also serves as a County Director and Peace Ambassador for Barbados at the WPCCDO. Dr. Daisley holds various positions on international boards, the Euro-Global Contemporary Studies Journal Board, member of the High Council of the World University of Sports as well. The TMS Indian think tank, Human Rights, as honorary, let me go back to that. The TMS India Think Human Rights as honorary board advisor on world peace and humanity. That's another role that he plays. The ISO TC 323 Circular Economy on the Governance Committee, that's a space that he holds as well. Dr. Daisley has received the World Peace Award from WPT Sweden, the title of Javanese Nobility from the Kingdom of Solo Surakarta Hadingrat Sultanate in Indonesia. I know I brutalized that. And the title of Javanese Nobility Officer from the Kingdom of Majapahit, Ancestral Kingdom, Indonesia. Honorary doctorates in human rights from Elizabeth College, the World Organization for Human Rights, and the Pioneer Group for International Peace, the International Human Rights Organization, and the World Culture Forum. He has also received the GEPEA Honorary Doctorate Honoris Causa in Arts degree, Doctor of Philosophy from the Knights of the Word magazine and the Jordanian Coalition for Civil Society Organizations. The Good Samaritan Theological Seminary conferred honorary doctorates and professor award in professional development training on Dr. Daisley. He holds a Bachelor of Theology from Summit Bible College in California and a Master's of Science in Organizational Behavior from a non-regionally accredited institution. Ladies and gentlemen, His Eminence Ambassador Professor Adrian Daisley.
Wow, I don't know if I can speak after that introduction.
Where you sitting?
But thank you so very much, ladies and gentlemen. As we look at our conversation today, we're going to look at a comprehensive approach to crime and justice reform. And this is very close to my heart, not just from a sustainable standpoint, but it's close to my heart from the perspective that we need a new approach to justice in our society. It is crucial that we consider the complex intersectionality of identity and adopt an innovative strategic perspective as we move forward. And so, because crime and justice reform is not just an abstract concept, it deeply impacts the lives of individuals and communities around the world. Our current system often fails to address unique challenges faced by marginalized groups, perpetuating, inequality and also injustice. I think that by adopting a comprehensive approach that incorporates intersectionality reform and reimagination, we can have a change strategy. I am also a certified life coach. And because I'm a certified life coach, a lot of the work that I do with young people is about, now that you've reached here, how do you get from this point to the other in your life? To truly achieve comprehensive reform, we must recognize and address the intersections of race, gender, class, and other identities within the criminal justice system. Intersectionality, acknowledges that individuals experience multiple forms of oppression. At the same time, these intersections actually create unique challenges, challenges and disadvantages. By understanding and incorporating intersectionality into our reform process and efforts, we can ensure that no person, is left behind or is unfairly treated within the criminal justice system. In order to achieve comprehensive reform within this system, it is crucial to recognize and address the issues that make us human, the things that make people look down on us or look at us in a way that is not very untoward. Class, where we were born. Some organizations don't operate or transform specific places because of where they're located. And earlier in our discussion, we've had some amazing speakers who've touched not only on the intersectionality of crime and justice, but it also looked at how do we as a people take responsibility for our society. Our guest Antonio said, it takes a village to raise a child, and it doesn't matter what that child or who that child is, whose parent that child is, what challenges that child has. When I was in Brazil, one of the things that touched my heart a lot is that we worked a lot with autistic children. And because I also taught English there, life skills and English. And one of the things that one of the grandmothers said to me is, she said, I don't know what you did to cause him to connect with language, because by the end, he was actually interested in learning English, was speaking to the teachers at the college. And this is small beginnings, because I was a Caribbean guy living in a country where I didn't speak the language officially. And to overcome a lot of those challenges, one of the things that I found is that the resilience that I learned in my country, in the difficult environment that I grew up in, actually taught me how to stand up, how to speak up, not just for myself, but for others. And so I think by comprehending and integrating an intersectionality into our reform efforts, we can guarantee that no individual feels ostracized or feels separated because of classism or where they are. The concept of intersectionality was first introduced by a legal scholar, actually, Kimberly Crenshaw, in the late 1980s. It highlights how multiple dimensions of persons' identity, such as race, gender, class, sexuality, disability, and more issues that weren't raised, interact and intersect and shape the experiences and opportunities of each individual. I also would like to say that, when examining crime and justice in society through an intersectional lens, it becomes evident that certain groups face disproportionate levels of discrimination, bias, and disadvantage. For example, Black women may experience a unique set of challenges that stem from both their race and their gender. They may face racial profiling, discrimination, as well as gender-based violence and inequality. Similarly, individuals who belong to marginalized racial or ethnic communities also fall into lower socioeconomic classes. And they may encounter additional barriers to their treatment within the criminal justice system. I would have mentioned earlier that when you were born in an environment where you were poor, sometimes you don't get that recognition. If you have a problem, sometimes there are no social systems that you can actually go through that is there for you. If you're in certain environments, the social support systems are not there. Intersectionality also allows us to understand how different forms of oppression intersect and compound, resulting in complex intertwined experiences. For example, in our society, a person who has been traumatized from a child, they have difficulty building communication, reaching out for help, even talking about the situation, or even feeling love. And if we're really talking about transforming our world, we have to look at the issues that other people don't want to talk about. We need to acknowledge that these intersections that are mentioned, they coalesce into an idea that each individual not only has a different perspective, but also experience of their perspective. And when they go out into the world and they tell you what they have been through, they can transition, but they have to first identify as the victim. They have to say, well, this has happened to me. I feel this in my environment. I feel unsupported. And that's where we can transition them to the victor. What is the victor? The victor is bringing that child now into a place or an individual into a place where they feel whole, where they feel acknowledged, where they feel seen. We live in a world right now where people are not seen. We are stuck in social media, stuck in our Twitter, in our TikToks, our Instagram. And for an individual to feel seen, sometimes they have to do something out of the ordinary. And sometimes that involves crime. And we have to put a stamp that crime is wrong. We have to make it known that we stand against all forms of crime. But we also have to say that as human beings, we have to find a way to get our young people and individuals alike to be heard, creating systems where they can be heard, creating spaces where they can speak and not be judged or, looked at in a funny way because they have an opinion about something, or their opinion is different to our opinion, or their expression is different to our expression. I would also like to say that, this data that we identify isn't, categorized only in Barbados or in the Caribbean. in my experiences in Brazil, we have very high levels of crime there. And a lot of the reasons, in talking to police officers and probation officers there, they have said to me, the biggest issue is fatherlessness. Fathers are there, but they're not there. They're there, they might give a little money, or they might buy some groceries if they can afford. But that voice that speaks into that life, that causes that child to blossom into believing in themselves, is not there. When we talk about, when we are given a platform, when we become leaders, when I was younger, I didn't understand what I was being prepared for. Now that I am on the platform, I understand what I'm being prepared for. I understand the responsibility that I have for every word that comes from my mouth, and the responsibility that we have to use our power to make a difference in our society. I would also like to say that there are systemic biases and discriminatory practices that must be stamped out. That before a person who has offended is found guilty, they're already classified as guilty because of the color of their skin or because of where they live. We have to really be honest about the reality of the situation that we are faced with. It isn't just in a Caribbean context, it's a global issue. Thirdly, it involves actively involving and listening to affected communities in the reform process. We cannot reform our justice system if we do not know what young people are saying, if we do not know what they need, if we do not know what makes them think the way they do. We need to recognize that our young people aren't titles just for us to get support on a program or a project. Our young people are human beings, souls, people who need love, who need care, who need attention, and who need to be heard. Furthermore, when we talk about intersectionality, I want to say, that when we embrace this concept in our understanding of crime and justice, we can foster a more equitable and just system. We don't want the system to only be just, but we also want it to be equitable. We want it to be accessible. We have a good justice system, but is it accessible to everyone, regardless of their class in society? That's the question. Through comprehensive reforms that consider this concept, because we're looking at it through an intersectional perspective. That's what I'm offering today as a course. Our world, we are not here for us. We are here for them. We go through experience, transition, learn, we grow, we build for them. And when we understand that we're doing it for them, that's when our lives begin. Our lives begin when we realize that it's not about the polls. It's not about the polling stations. It's not about the votes. It's not about the person supporting or even liking what we are doing. It's about the lives changed. It's about the lives transformed. So when examining crime through this intersectional lens in the Caribbean and Latin America context, it's important to consider diverse populations, intersecting identities with our societies, also factors of race, ethnicity, and social class. I would not underscore this enough. In many Caribbean and Latin Caribbean countries, marginalized communities, including those of Afro-descendant and indigenous backgrounds, often face disproportionate levels of crime, violence, and discrimination. I've seen this with my own two eyes in Brazil, because various parts of it were very, very, very outwardly, aggressive towards certain sects of society, indigenous. And that's why we can see a transformation taking place in Brazil with this new leader that has taken over. He's given a voice to the unheard and beginning to bring transformation back to Brazil. You know, I also want to say that when we talk about intersectionality, we can't forget about gender. We can't forget about how different genders are treated within the system. You know, we also need to talk about the fact that, you know, sometimes men are criminalized. You know, I live in a society where I often wonder, where are men? I often wonder where the voices of our men, where's the strength of our men rising up to be the voice for the young man next door. I often wonder these things. And when I see forums like this, I feel good. I feel good to be invited to speak on a panel like this and give my heart, because I can see people who care about those young men who will grow up without a role model and grow up without a positive role model. We need to have efforts, and I need to say that, you know, we have some efforts in the Caribbean. We have good criminal justice system in Barbados. That's I can tell you that for sure, right? And there's a transformation taking place in Barbados, but we need to see that expanded out, you know, to the other territories in CARICOM. So the intersection of gender and identities and social classes, which I mentioned before, must be spoken about. I also want to say that efforts to address these in the region of the Caribbean involve implementing comprehensive criminal justice reforms, promoting community policing strategies, which I am very, very big on, strengthening law enforcement capabilities, giving them resources, and also training and development is important, because when you are accused of a crime, sometimes you are treated as if you are a criminal before you are even given an opportunity to share your side of the story. And that is a cultural thing. Crime, you know, when you are in a particular environment, you have to be very careful what you say. You should not be afraid. You should not have to be afraid of your legal system. You should not be afraid of your police system. That's there to protect you. And so we need to bring some positive reform to our justice system. Social, economic development initiatives aimed at reducing poverty, inequality, and social exclusion also play a role in these reforms that we're talking about. We use our brains. We learn. Why do we learn? We learn so that we can teach. We teach so that we can transform. We transform so we can build. We build so that we can have a legacy. It is important to note that specific statistics that I mentioned earlier and these data sets, are recommended by official websites, all right? And so they're not out of my head. Things like the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, all right? The Organization of American States and the Caribbean Community, which is CARICOM. It takes me into my last point. We need to focus on overcoming systemic flaws. Reform is a crucial aspect of this transformation that, Margie Beasley would have raised within the context of this conference. It requires us to critically examine the flaws, biases ingrained in the system, that are built into the system, that are supported by the system, that are fed by the system, that continues to give life, that comes from the system. Criminal profiling, racial profiling, because of where you were born or where you live. We need to make sure that there's justice that is equal and accessible to all. So the role of government and psycho-spiritual leaders is important. We mustn't talk about change only in the context of, well, you have to go to church to change. What is the church doing to change society? What is the church doing to impact society? There are a lot of programs that churches are doing, but we need to marry the church with civic responsibility and hold them accountable. Hold the leaders accountable. They're all leaders. We are all leaders. We should be accountable for our actions. We are not placed here to have a voice and not use our voice. The role of governments are both strategic from the perspective of creating strategies that transform with policy, but governments also can be role models. How many of our young people can look at our politicians and say, I want to be like him, I want to be like her? We say, our young people say, I want to be like that rapper, I want to be like Jay-Z, or I want to be like Beyonce. But why are they not looking at us and saying, I want to be like him, I want to be like her? Because unfortunately, and this was raised earlier, crime is something that is supported in certain spaces, accepted in certain spaces, normal in certain spaces. We need to make crime what it is. Crime. Call it what it is. You know, a larger portion of crime is committed by blue collar crime. Persons who wear a suit. When you have guns coming into a country, sometimes it's the people who wear the suits who have access to the ports. Let's talk about the reality of how are we going to transform our world if we keep our mouths shut, if we don't put policies in place, if we don't use the authority that we've been given to transform our world. I also would finish by saying that as the governments play a crucial role in shaping, implementing policies and laws, and to govern the criminal justice system, it has the power to also enact legislative changes that can address systemic flaws that I mentioned earlier, and some specific rules of government in crime and justice reform can include policy development. Governments can develop policies that promote fair, evidence-based practices within the criminal justice system. This also includes establishing guidelines for law enforcement, sentencing, rehabilitation, communication with persons who committed a crime between the law enforcement officer and the individual, the parents, the person who is the mediator. Also, resource allocation. Governments can allocate resources to support initiatives aimed at young people, aimed at civic organizations in the society that actually has the grassroots ear that can connect with the young people and also have the respect of the young people as well. Governments can also hire life coaches, empower life coaches, and give them the resources that they need so that they can help their community. Governments can also collaborate and coordinate. If they don't want to release the power, they can actually coordinate the effort. And we can supply the manpower. They can give us the policy. We can come up with a plan. But we need to bring change and transformation. Enough talk. This forum is for us to talk about how are we going to do it. We have conversations about what is going on, but what are we going to do next? What's the next steps? And so all that I am adding is added to what has been said, already. Oversight and accountability. Governments have the responsibility to ensure that criminal justice system operates fairly and transparently. Not just fair, but transparent. We have to have a system that we look at them and compare them to a standard and say, you've not done your part. You've not kept the promise. You've not done what you said you will do. And these are, this is the ways you can actually make it up in our society. I believe that we have the power, we have the tools, we have the resources, and we have the manpower, and we have the people. And if we can come together, we can make a significant difference in our world. Thank you so very much, everyone.
And thank you, Ambassador Professor Daisley. You nailed it, as I knew you would. And again, you brought us back to, if not every one of the concepts that each of the previous presenters would have ventilated and had elevated. So thank you for reinforcing, adding additional concepts and strategies that we need to think about and incorporate into what we do going forward. I do want to highlight, you made a comment just now, you said oversight and accountability were essential components of what government's role needs to look like, should look like, and is. And the thought that struck me was absolutely correct. And it goes both ways. Accountability for the persons subject to the rule, regulation, law, whichever it is, but also accountability and oversight of those making the rules and the laws and the regulations. It is a two-way street. And part of the pushback, a lot of times you will hear the youth say, because I do a lot of research, I do a lot of social research. What you hear the youth saying is, but wait a minute, Minister so-and-so doing that, Prime Minister so-and-so, this elected official, this person in a position of trust, this person who is, do you see what I'm saying? So our walk and our talk don't line up. So there's a lack of authenticity. And our children aren't stupid. They are far from stupid, and they're watching it. They're watching and they're emulating. So again, you made some really strong, valid points. You talked about evidence-based. Absolutely. We need to be careful when we talk about evidence. Whose evidence? In what context? How old is that evidence? Has it been characterized correctly? Do we have anything that is relative to the conditions and the if you will, sector that we're talking about, the region? We have to consider culture. We have to, it is so multifaceted and intersectional that it's important that we have that conversation. And also, this is the last thing I'm going to say, I'm opening up the floor. When you bring the argument or the conversation about change to persons in position of power, or persons like parents, and again, in position of power, sometimes what they hear is accusation, not articulation. Oh, why, it's not my fault, as opposed to, oh, wow, is that what's going on? What role am I potentially playing in it? And how do we fix it? And we have to also remember our elected officials are people first. So they too come and approach problem solving too many times from a personal issue. They take it personal and approach it from a personal perspective. How does it benefit me? How can it harm me? As opposed to, who am I here to serve? What is my job? And as we talked about Ubuntu, I believe somebody raised that earlier. I am because we are. You also reinforced and uplifted that as well. Thank you. I know you need to run. I don't know if you can stay a few and allow persons to reflect back to you, but is there anybody who has any comments, feedback, questions, really quick, because he does have a meeting he needs to go to. Does anybody want to say anything to Ambassador Daisley before he has to dash?
Madam Chair, yeah, I listened to the ambassador, and sometimes I wonder, he speaks to the fact that we have to stamp out the disparity and so on. But I'm wondering, what is the solution? Because he did say that it's not unique to Guyana. But the problem is pervasive. And therefore, while we know we need to stamp it out and so on, how do we get there? Because it doesn't look as though it's getting better. He spoke to the reality that young people want to emulate rappers and sportsmen and so on, but you don't hear them with the same level of comparison wanting to emulate politicians. Again, how do we get there? The observation is correct, but as we deal with solutions, how do we get the racial disparity to cease, the ethnic disparity to cease, the governmental balance and equity in the dispersion of the wealth of the countries and the justice system? So even as you spoke truth, those questions linger in my mind.
Ambassador.
Yeah, thank you so very much, Pastor Wendell. Actually, we were taught how to analyze situations. We die through analytical living. We sit down and we look at the problem, and I can tell you what the problem is. I can tell you how the problem came about. But to answer your question, it is going to take an entire identity shift as a people. Because first of all, as a people, we do not respect our own. Let's start, it has to start home. So let's talk about how we treat our neighbors first. All right? You ask, how do we get there? Let's start from the foundation. How I treat my neighbor first, with respect, with understanding. How do I have compassion when I don't understand? How do I have compassion when your perspective is different to mine? Our leaders, yes, are doing the best that they can because they're doing the best with the information that was given to them when they met the problem. The challenge is it takes a different kind of thinking for us to actually speak to the problem. So to have the dialogue and not have the tools is just to be armed with a pen. In order for us to bring the transformation, we have to give them the pen, the ink, the paper. And so I believe that it's going to take a coaching, change management perspective, which I'm very happy that I think Marjorie Biza is doing with the context of this program. So if you ask me how, I think it's going to be through this program.
Pastor, did that get to your question?
Well, I'm hearing the challenge. The ambassador speaks to the challenge, and I'm hearing that, and I will accept that for an answer, except I would like he's saying this program that you have here, and I agree with him, lends to that change that needs to be actualized. I would like to hear some more of individual inputs as to what we are doing to bring about that change. What we think can be done. You know what I mean. Some little tips on how we can achieve it. Rather than just highlighting the issues,
right,
which
so
are there,
here,
but so, you know,
because
so you wanted to
you
fill
were,
in the frame.
Yeah, because you would have said, what are we doing? And I would have given you a systems perspective, a systems approach. I believe that our problem is actually in our systems. Our systems is supported by the way we perceive our world. Our worldview is very twisted. Spiritually, we can use the spiritual dimensions to transform the mentalities of our people. Culturally, we can empower our people to believe in themselves and to love who they are. We can also look at socially, how I interact with you is important. How I see myself is important because it tells me how I'm going to see you. And so even if we are talking about finding solutions, we can't find solutions alone. I can't tell you what the answers are. This systems-based approach means that I'm stepping out of my silo. I'm coming on your side. I am meeting you on your level. You are meeting me on my level, and we're saying there's a problem. We acknowledge there's a problem. These are some of the symptoms, but these are also some of the things that we could do. I am telling you, generally speaking, that we can bring transformation, but we're going to taking the content out of this workshop. That's what it's going to take, taking the content of reworking it into society, into programs, because programs work. I believe programs work. I'm not sure what your perspective is, Pastor.
We may have to leave it there actually, because time is running. But let me interject this, and I think hopefully it might be helpful. I noted here under this notion of identity shift, I put three things. I put faith, family, and legislation. And that could even be policy. What did I say after that? Under faith, I said character, principles. Under family, I noted foundation and reinforcement. Under legislation, I said facilitation. Yeah. So again, each of those play a role, and the community around all of that is going to be made up of people coming from those families. So that's necessarily going to have a, if you will, a beneficial effect. It's going to pay itself forward. It will inform the culture. So where do we begin? Marjorie Beezer's perspective, and I've been saying this across the Caribbean and here in the, I mean, across the world, actually, the faith community plays an, I mean, just an integral role and a key, they have a key level that we have yet to leverage. Yeah, because remember now, think about this. Where do our principles come from? Where do the laws that we have in place emanate from? They come out of a faith context. They come out of a faith tradition. Thou shalt not kill. Thou shalt not steal. Yeah, and there are consequences. So the faith community, and if you have no faith tradition, the principles upon which your life is governed serve as a great place to start. Because if that pastor, imam, preacher, guru, if that person is from the pulpit or however, wherever those lessons are being shared from, if that person is saying, you know what, here is what's acceptable, here's what's not. Here is what will, here is how you define yourself. Here is what makes a quote unquote good person. Here is the community standard. And we are going to hold ourselves accountable. And so I think the faith community has a lead role to play in this work, even as they collaborate with the other levels of culture, governance, family. And I think that's where where we will gain traction in terms of creating real change and catalyzing it into something great. So that's my perspective. And I think definitely there's more to come. I thank you so much for staying the course with us. I know you have something else to do. You've added such great value, and continue to look forward to you being a part of this work. So don't think you get one on. All right then.
Thank you very much, everyone.
More to come. We thank you.